If you clicked on this video, I'm assuming you currently work a full-time job and you are trying to figure out ways to balance your busy life while also figuring out how to day trade part-time. And I know from personal experience how tough this can be because back in the day when I first started, the first 3 years, I was not only working a full-time, it's not your typical 9 to 5 either. I was managing gyms, which are crazy work weeks, like on average, probably 8 to 9 hour days. I also had my own online nutrition and personal training business. I was getting into real estate. I just was all over the place. And on top of all that, I was spending at least 3 to 4 hours per day trading, studying, and just trying to figure out a strategy that would allow me to become profitable at day trading because I just wanted the extra income at that point. I wanted to eventually quit my 9 to 5 and eventually become financially free because man, did I hate having somebody tell me what to do. So with that being said, let's dive into what this video is going to be about today. All things helping you figure out how to become a part-time day trader. And so I actually would still consider myself today a part-time day trader because I typically only trade for 2 hours or less. So I'm not on the screens all day long. I've definitely mastered what I consider a really healthy balance between personal life and work. And I just want to share the strategies that I have learned along the way that I think might help you guys as well. So step number one, we're going to start with why it's really important you need to analyze your weekly schedule. And I don't mean just brush it over in your head. I would love for you guys to get a piece of paper and something to write with. And we're actually going to walk through your time zone and then days and times that you actually might be more available. You need to write down these things in key details. That way you can have more of a chance of actually executing on it. Because if you don't write it down, you are less likely to take action. You'll just watch this video and go about your day. So step number one, analyze your weekly schedule. Step number two is once you do that, then we're picking a strategy that would work with your schedule, right? But once you pick that strategy, then you can create your plan and then be able to execute on it, even while you're working full time. And last but not least, we'll end this video with trade examples, things that I used and strategies that I used actually still till this day. That can work very well if you do work a full-time job and at least have a lunch break. So we'll dive into more of that at the end, but let's just start with step number one. And if you haven't done so already, pause this video, grab something to write with, a pen and paper, so that way you can really see where you're going to have the most flexibility to trade and also to prep for your trades, which is going to be really, really key. So what times are best for you to trade? So for example, pre-market or lunchtime reversals were my favorite. And that's because I was in Eastern time. And so as a personal trainer and a gym manager, I had a lunch lull until about 3 p.m. and then things started to heat back up. So the middle of the day was really open for me, and that allowed a lot of flexibility for that midday, lunchtime into 3 p.m. for me to find strategies that worked really well for that time period. But if you're in a different time zone, like for example, when I was traveling to New Mexico, I was in a completely different time zone, 7:30 a.m. open to 2 p.m. close, and that really threw me off for my sleep schedule and all that. But just to show that it really does matter what time zone you're in, because that's going to make a difference with what time do you go to work, what time is your lunch break based on when the market is open. So I just want you to take a minute. Like I said, you can pause this video, write some things down and then continue, but take a minute to really, really think about, okay, first off, what time zone am I in? And then write down what time the market opens and what time the market closes. Then what days do you work and what times do you have to go into work? What time is your lunch break? And then compare that to market open and close and start to see if you can notice patterns of, okay, I have at least 45 minutes here. Or maybe I have an hour here, or maybe work's not as busy during this time or this day. Start to write those things down and it'll really help as we move through this. Step number two is pre-market prep. So for example, let's just say that you, after writing your schedule down and understanding your time zone, everything, you were like, okay, the best time for me to trade is going to be either pre-market before I go to work, or it's going to be lunchtime. And those are the two we're actually going to focus on because that was my case. So pre-market and lunchtime were my two best opportunities to trade. I actually want to point out something that just because you can trade in pre-market might not mean that you should. Maybe that's the time that you use to prep for the day. So pre-market prep is going to be very, very key, especially if you're working full time. You need to plan your key levels and you need to set alerts and wait for those to get hit. So I'm going to show you examples of what I mean and how I actually used that this past week. week to take a trade on this stock and trade options on SPY as well. And it was all from just pre-market prep and understanding where my key levels were and where I needed to wait to execute the trade that I had pre-planned in my head. I apologize if you guys can hear my really loud air conditioning in my RV. It is way too hot in Florida right now, so we're just gonna have to bear with me with that. But I do want to start off by going through some examples based on what you wrote down. So before we even dive into the trades that I was talking about, trade examples and strategies for if you do work a full-time job, I first want to just go over scenarios. So you need to decide which scenario fits your schedule the best. And so this comes from what you wrote down, right? So hypothetically speaking, let's say that you wrote down that maybe you live in Texas, and so your time zone is going to be 8:30 a.m. open to 3 p.m. close. And maybe you are thinking in your head, okay, I go to work at around, I've got to be there from 9 to 5. So we'll just do the typical, right? So I've got to be at work at 9 a.m. The market opens at 8:30. That's not going to work. And then I don't get off till 5 p.m. and the market closes at 3 p.m. So then your best strategy there is going to be either waking up really early and trying to trade pre-market, or the lunchtime. So typically I will say, regardless across the board, unless you live like over here in California and it's 6:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., the pre-market trading and the lunch reversals are going to be your bread and butter, but that is really situational dependent. I want to highlight that. So this video is going to be catered to somebody who might be a little bit closer to my Eastern time zone, and the pre-market and the lunchtime are going to be your best bet. But if that's not fitting for you, this video still should be able to allow you to analyze your schedule enough to say, okay, I get what she's doing there, but based on my schedule, this would work better. So I just want to highlight that this really needs to be catered to you based on where you live and what your availability looks like. So for this example case, we'll just stick with the Texas theme, 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. close. And then we're assuming that you do a typical 9 to 5 workday. So that means you need to wake up in pre-market and plan your key levels. So what that could look like is, we're just going to use an example. China low float penny stocks were really hot the past week or so. And so I was personally playing a CJJD. I had mentioned it in the mid 80s, and you can see we had a really nice spike up to 123 from there. And then we had been trying to break trend, but we just were failing each time. Started to make lower highs, and then we eventually broke trend on a bigger time frame. So that pattern did break. I did make some nice day trades on it, but I'm gonna just keep it on my radar next week, just in case we do find buyers again near this mid 80 to 85 range. But what this could look like is, if you are choosing, okay, I have some time in pre-market, but I don't want to necessarily trade in pre-market, then what that looks like is you use that time before you go to work to prep the day. So you're setting your alerts, you're setting your key levels, or maybe you're even setting buy targets and you're using order brackets. So you can set your entry, your exit, your stop, your take profit. You can get so advanced with order brackets, it's crazy. And that could be very helpful for you if you are just the type of person who has not even like a second to look at their phone. But for most people, I feel like they do at least have the advantage of, yes, you may be working, but you can periodically check your phone. If you get an alert, you can go run to the bathroom real quick. Or that's at least what I used to do. I would set alerts on my phone, and then I would take a ton of bathroom breaks because my alert would get hit, and I knew I had to go buy then because we were at support. And so my boss eventually caught on to me. But this comes to the fact that there are a million ways to trade, right? There's a million strategies. And so the whole point of my channel is to simplify things. So in simple terms, what you could have been doing is understanding that China low float stocks were very hot. And you understood that because you could just look at previous runners on the day, right? So top kind of sparked the entire sector, and now you can see it came right back down. This is why these are not long-term holds. These are more momentum day trades. So top and a few others sparked the entire China low float stock peak. And so I just wanted to take advantage of that trending sector, that, retail hype around these stocks. And so that is what brought my attention to CJJD. I also apologize for the loud planes today. It just seems like nobody wants to be quiet on the weekend. Back to what I was saying is, CJJD was on my radar for several reasons. It was low float, volume was increasing. We were making some higher lows, which was a bullish sign, on this trend line, which eventually we did break. But you can see right here was a great opportunity. So penny stocks I love for a full-time job. This is actually how I got started, but there is a specific way to play them. So I personally love to play sympathy plays versus chasing the high volatility runners, and CJJD was a sympathy play, which worked out very, very well. And I'll put a little clip on the screen really quick so you can see that I actually was day trading it with size, and I was hovering about 800 to 1,000 per day trade on this one, just shooting for little moves to this trend line. And if we failed, I was out and I waited for a retest of support. So very basic stuff there. But that was actually all I did when I first started. My first 2 years was penny stocks, and what I was doing is looking for sympathy plays, and that pre-market time frame I was looking for what was the high volume runner of the day, and then I was trying to understand, okay, so if this one's running, then let me look for this sympathy. And that's what I was doing in pre-market. I was planning basically what I wanted to trade as a sympathy for that high volatility runner, because I knew if I was working full-time there was no way I was going to be able to keep track of something like top. It was up way too much, it was way too volatile, and it just was really, really hard to trade if you're working full-time. So for me, I've always gravitated towards sympathies. That was where the CJJD one came into play. And so just making sure that you are doing your due diligence and making sure that you are not utilizing penny stocks as maybe like a long-term investment. This is obviously not financial advice. Just know that the way that I trade them is I strictly trade them. I do not invest in them long-term, because they are usually cash poor. But that is one way you can go about this, and that's personally how I started, and I still have certain ways that I trade them until this day. But let's say that you're like, I really don't like penny stocks and I don't like swing trading and it's just not what I want to do. Okay, well then we can move into something like options or futures, which is basically leverage trading on large caps. So if you have a small account, you could still trade them, but it is much more difficult, especially if you have a full-time job. But I'm going to give you guys some tips and tricks that helped me. So one thing I want to say right off the bat is if you plan to trade options and you are working a full-time job, please do not come in with the mindset of the buy and hold scenario, especially if you're trading short-term expiration. That will be a recipe for disaster. I actually just covered that in the worst day trading strategies video. If you've not seen that, go check that out. But that was something that I made a huge mistake on, is I went from trading penny stocks, which I was super comfortable holding and being flexible with the way that I traded them. I also traded them with size, and I had figured out a strategy that worked for me, right? But when I moved into options, I tried to use that same strategy and thought process, and it was a dumpster fire. Ideally, if you are going to trade options and you work a full-time job, the best strategy, and we'll just go ahead and jump into step number 3 when we talk about the strategies that I used and I used still to this day. I also have another video on this if it does intrigue you, but it's lunchtime reversals is a good thing to look for. Typically after the morning open, whatever directional move we've had, people tend to take profits. It's not a sure thing always, and there's things that you need to look for a true reversal. However, that is a time period that is great to look for that directional change. If you're coming in at lunch and you do want to trade lunch reversals, just making sure that you're giving yourself some flexibility on strike price and expiration date. Don't go too far out of the money and don't go too close to expiration, because those are going to be way too volatile, especially if you're trading from your phone. But for example, look right here at lunchtime, you see we got a nice reversal, and this was a key level that I already had pre-planned before market opened at 407.17. You can see we hit it perfectly and came back down. Something that I would have looked for back in the day is just setting alerts near these key levels that I already had pre-planned, but that could also look like setting alerts near support and resistance in pre-market. That can look like setting the open candle range alert. So you can see we actually filled the gap. Not only was this a key level for me, but we also filled the gap to the open candle here, found sellers, and then moved right back down to another key range, which was previous support. So looking for a short here or a long here, it's obviously easier in hindsight, but this is where it comes into play, where you are setting your alerts. And so if you are coming in from your lunch break and you did your due diligence in pre-market, you understand, okay, if it's near 405, I'm going to look for a buy. If it's near 407, I'm going to look for a sell. That kind of thing, that kind of thought process. And you are coming into your lunch break and all of a sudden your alert gets hit that we've hit 407. Cool. You had already planned that you wanted to take a short there. Now you got your alert. And as long as you always have your risk level set before you get into a trade, then you can come in without having to be on the screens all day and know what trade you need to take and then execute on it. And for most people, that is their lunch break, right? So it might not be exactly around your lunch break, especially if you are in a different time zone. But I will say, on the flip side of things, at least in today's time period, most people have access to their phone or the ability to quickly look at their phone. And if you don't, then you're just going to have to be way more strict about the trades that you take. And you're just going to have to be patient for when you actually do have the time to look at the screens. Don't just buy something and close your phone and just hope it plays out. That is going to be a disaster. Last thing we'll touch on is pre-market trading or futures trading. So that is something that I've gotten into recently as of this year, and the futures of SPY is just ES. And the cool thing about futures that I really like is that there's way more flexibility on times you can trade these. So you can trade these in pre-market, you can trade these in after hours. Not only can you trade it in pre-market, after hours, you've got just way more flexibility. They also don't deal with theta. So if you are scared about holding a options position longer because of theta eating your premiums, then futures are a great alternative. And I really, really do love futures. They move fast. You can also trade minis, but that is going to be something else that I wish I would have looked at a long time ago versus jumping right into options when I worked full-time. Futures can give you way more of an advantage and an upper hand. So that's a wrap for today's video. I appreciate you guys so much for watching, and I really hope it brought value to you if you are working a full-time job on just some things you can keep an eye out on, right? It's obviously going to be a tough journey. Working full-time, trying to balance that and trading can be very overwhelming. However, it can also be extremely worth it if you don't give up and you do put in the time, because I really, really love the saying that trading is the most scalable business possible, because it is. There's unlimited potential, but it all has to start with the foundation you create and your ability to be patient while you're learning and give yourself that grace period of learning before you're just trying to quit your job and jump in full force, right? So I do want to highlight, because I get a lot of questions, I try my best to make as much free content as possible. That's all going to be on YouTube. I also have some extra freebies in the description box, master link below. So for example, if you're confused on lingo and things like that, I have a newbie starter pack. And then if you are curious on how you can get around the PDT rule, I also have a day trading seminar on that. But outside of all of that, I do have a trading community that includes my 8-week program, complete A to Z options, my strategies, futures, penny stocks, all that good stuff. And if you are interested in further education and then more of me on a day-to-day basis during the week at least, that would be in the description box down below, master link, and it'll say Discord access and Peachy Investor community. More info on that can be found below. But I appreciate you guys so much for watching. I do want to highlight at the end of every video, I let you guys know that please watch out for the WhatsApp scammers in the comments. I do not have WhatsApp. Those are all bots. And then when it comes to Instagram, I only have the Instagram that's linked in the description box. No other ones. I will never direct message you. Please do not fall for any scammers. And with that being said, I will see you guys next week.